Good evening and a warm welcome to this evening's presentation. Our series of online talks and conversations continues with our guest, Emil Draitser. His topic, Laughing All the Way to Freedom. And I'll introduce Emil in just a moment. This talk was originally scheduled for last week, so thanks to all of you, and also thank you to our speaker for rearranging at short notice. This evening we have a truly international audience and an international speaker too. Emil is joining us from New York. Welcome to you wherever you are in the UK and indeed wherever you are in the world. And I'm delighted to welcome viewers from Canada, Israel, Poland, Sweden and the United States of America. Please do ask questions. You can do this at any time you like by using the Q&A facility on your screen and typing in your question. And as ever, we will try to get through as many of your questions as we can. Please also be aware of the chat facility on your screen, which you can use to send a message to all of the other participants on this webinar, should you wish to do so. Finally, this event is being recorded and will be posted on the MILIM website at milim.org.uk in the near future. There you can find out about our packed calendar of future events, see recordings of past events and book tickets for anything you would like to see. And so to our speaker. Emil Draitser was born in Odessa, Ukraine, into a working-class Jewish family. He studied at the Odessa Polytechnic Institute and the Moscow School of Journalism. Under the pen name Emil Abramov, he began his writing career as a freelancer, producing satirical articles for Soviet publications. Having been blacklisted for writing a critical article about an important official, he emigrated to the United States. In 1975, he settled in Los Angeles, where he gained a PhD in Russian literature from UCLA. Since 1986, he has been professor of Russian at Hunter College in New York City. He's written several books about his experiences, as well as some works of fiction. His most recent book, In the Jaws of the Crocodile, describes his career working as a satirist in the Soviet Union. His scholarly work has been widely published, and he is a three-time recipient of prestigious fellowships from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, as well as receiving numerous grants from City University, New York. Emil, thank you so much for being our guest this evening. We're all very excited to hear what you have to say. So without further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I wanted to start with explanation why the title of my talk is Laughing All the Way to Freedom. I don't want people to have a wrong idea that I see that it was an easy time of easy kind of giggling and laughing. The only reason why I title my talk is because it covers the whole life of Soviet Jewry from the end of World War II all the way through immigration. And to illustrate, I use from time to time Jewish underground jokes to show how Jews related to all this event and how they cope with it. So basically, I wanted to also explain that although I'm presented here as the author of my last volume, in the Jaws of Crocodile, describes my Soviet life from the age of 15 to the age of 37 when I left the Soviet Union. I wanted to talk actually about the trilogy, my autobiographical trilogy, which starts with the first book in this trilogy called Shush, Growing Up Jewish Under Stalin. Let me share screen with you and see what how we can produce it. So, I wanted to also show the covers of my books. So the first book, Shush, is covering a period from June 1941, the time when German troops invaded the Soviet Union, till June 1953, means a few months after Stalin's death. That covers actually my early years as a child and onto early youth. The second book, time-wise, is In the Jaws of Crocodile, which starts a few months after the end of the Shush, and goes all the way through my immigration in October 1974. And finally, the book, Farewell Mama Odessa, is covering my immigration experience from October 1974 to the first year of settling in totally new land and all the challenges that I met there. So first of all, I wanted to explain for those who don't know Odessa background, that Odessa was built by Catherine the Great as a necessity to have a port to trade grain with Europe. And she invited French architects, and you can see that the main quarters of Odessa look like Paris. When I first came to Paris, I saw it all in Odessa. So that's but at the same time, in order to help Odessa to help Odessa with its grain export, Catherine invited Jews who lived on the Pale of Settlement to help with this enterprise. They came in and they found life in Odessa much to their liking, and they sometimes there was even either saying he lives like a king, like a tsar in Odessa. In other words, so much more freedom than they had in the small settlements in on the Russian Empire. So Odessa from the outset was created, actually became a melting pot of many nationalities. Besides Russian Ukrainians, there were and Jews, there were also Georgians and Armenians and Greeks and Turks and so many other people, up to 100 nationalities lived there. And so there's no then surprise then when in 19th century, Mark Twain came to Odessa as a journalist, and he describes the innocents abroad in his book. He said, no matter where, when I was in Odessa, we didn't feel that we are in Russia. It looks like America. I look down the street, up the street. It's all America. It's not Russia. And probably what he actually had in mind, that Odessa looked like New York in the sense that it was melting pot of so many nationalities. So at the end of toward the end of 19th century, up to even 30%, or 1/3 at least, the population of Odessa were Jews. So Odessa is known to be a cradle of of Jewish Yiddish culture. Sholem Aleichem lived here and worked. Also, Mendel Moches Forum and the great Jewish poet Owen Bialik. So Odessa was also a center of Jewish theater. It became widely known, even to the extent that the daughter of Odessa actors then came to America. Her name is Adler. She taught teaching all the biggest movie stars in America. So, so the first book, I have to explain why the title is Shush. The first years after coming to Odessa from evacuation during wartime with my mother, no matter what, I was always heard from my parents, shush, don't say any word in Yiddish. Don't by any means identify yourself as a Jew, because the time was very perilous. Why? Because the post-war anti-Semitic popular claim was that the Jews did not fight. They ran away and hid in Tashkent. Yes, just to give you a geographical level, this is the part of Soviet territory that's invaded by German troops, and this is the whole. So Odessa, from Odessa, I with my mother ran from advancing German troops, or were bombed on the way, all the way through Stalingrad and then down to Central Asia to the Tashkent. So as a boy, I took it almost personally. I was only, mind you, a 7-year-old at the end of the World War II, that I hid in it. So in other words, the atmosphere was of this popular kind of anti-Semitism in Odessa, despite the fact that it was such a Jewish city and so much Jews living there, was really very tense. So part of it, why? Because of the wartime Nazi propaganda. I have found online a couple of German wartime leaflets. Here's the one that reads, is as any is do really is it ever happened that that Kaik toils for himself? No, never. It means he just exploited some other people. Or another one, definitely meant to undermine the fighting spirit of the Soviet troops, of the Russians. Russian blood is being spilled at the front line. For whom? And obviously you see the anti-Semitic caricature of a stereotype of a Jew. In other words, the implication, you're just protecting Jews. That's all to it. Also, it did not help that the official Soviet media suppressed all the Jewish heroes of World War II. For example, it became known much later that Isaac Preseisen, a Jewish pilot, rammed a column of enemy tanks on a downed plane. He was just listed lost in action. While at the same heroic deed was done by Nikolai Gastella, and he was awarded the title of Hero of Soviet Union. Everybody knew about Gastella. Nobody knew about the Preseisen. Same goes to Zoya Kosmidemyanskaya. There was a young girl who helped partisans during wartime times. She was caught, she was tortured, but she behaved heroically. And she was, that was in November 1941, and she was highly claimed after in post-war time as the hero of the war. You see monuments, busts of her, names of schools, of all kinds of steamships, enterprises in her name. At the same time, it became much known and never publicized fully. There was a Masha Bruskina, a Jewish girl, who actually did exactly the same thing. She was caught, she was tortured, she never gave up any secrets of the partisan. And actually it even happened a month before Zoya Kosmidemyanskaya. Not a peep in the press, not a peep. At the same time, in my own family, practically was filled with people who not only fought, but fought heroically, were awarded. And this, my father was at the war. My mother also, in part, while we were running from the German troops, was still, my mother helped work for the war. I mean, airplane repair shop. So she and they were also awarded with medals after the war, after the end of the war. So this, and in the same time, it's in the right after the, probably within less than a year after the end of the World War II, anti-Semitic campaigns started in the Soviet Union. One is about the ruthless cosmopolitans. Who were the ruthless cosmopolitans? This is the caricature from the journal Crocodile, and actually it reads, Parspakles Vagabond. And who is this? It looks like he's a literary critic, and he admires, we can see Jean-Paul Sartre, Griffith, he admires all kinds of Western artists, Western cultural figures, doesn't pay duty to the Russian artists. So therefore, the implication is that he's a traitor to the culture, like shows lack of patriotism. And it was signaled by murder of probably one of the most famous Jewish personality of the time, Solomon Michaels. They staged as an accident, the KGB staged as an accident his murder. And there was a horrible signal. Obviously, the rumors went all the way from Minsk, that's what had happened, to Odessa, and my parents took it as a bad sign, a bad omen of what is coming. Also, in August 1952, the night of the murder, Jewish poets and writers, most of them members of the anti-fascist committee, was also part of that period of time. And finally, the Doctor's Plot, a group of, this is again caricature from the Crocodile magazine, that a group of doctors, most of them Jewish, with Jewish names were picked on purpose, accused of attempting of poisoning the heads of the Soviet government. So that's the atmosphere in which what existed in the country. At the same time, I, as a child, was caught between the two worlds. On one side, this is me as a young pioneer. I went to, obviously, to school, belonged to Young Pioneers. This is the group of them. And at the same time, the time was marked by rise of great Russian chauvinism. For example, this is the poster that was ubiquitous at that time. Glory to the Russian people, the mighty ones, the creators. And now we're talking about, I want to remind, over 100 nationalities lived in the Soviet Union at that time. And obviously none of them were, was of that standing, of that high kind of given the high honors of being the mighty ones, the creators, and so on. So at the same time, my family was Jewish, not observant, and to the point, but however, we observed all the Jewish holidays. My parents, from time to time, went to synagogue. Here is I'm with a group of my close relatives and friends, my uncles, my aunts, and we had even in our family erstwhile Jew, in what sense that he was a treasurer of the Odessa synagogue at that time. So that's I was kind of caught in between two worlds. And the tipping point came when I was 15. I remember it was springtime, close to Passover. And my mother insisted that we go to a bakery and the outskirts of the city early in wee hours to bake matzah. Why? Matzah was not sold in the stores. Matzah was only available, was possible to get if you bring your own flours to this small bakery on the outskirts of the city, and they will make it out of this. So I, obviously, as a child, I didn't want to go so early. I resisted it. Yes, I wanted to describe to you, this is the excerpt from my book, Shush, Growing Up Jewish Under Stalin. What happened at that moment, that to me, it was the most important moment in my biography of that time. So we came with my mother to this bakery. In the worn white coat, its sides flapping with his every movement, a young curly-haired baker with lively brown eyes is busy in front of a large oven. He's holding a white, long-handled wooden paddle. Despite the early hour, he's wide awake, friendly, and even jolly. He tosses the paddle from one hand to another, playing with it as if it were a pool key, opens the oven door and peers inside. Finally, throwing the oven door wide open, the baker begins to lift the sheets of ready matzah. In the oven's depth, by the far back wall, crimson orange flames dance. The baker stores the ready matzah in a carton once used for macaroni. Using the same paddle, he snatches up from the tray the rectangles of thinly rolled dough and lines them up evenly, row by row, on the hearthstone. Then he shuts the oven door, and nods cordially at Mama and me, wishing us a good holiday. Good Yontif. Good Yontif, Mama answers, brightening up instantly. Good Yontif. She repeats and pulls at my jacket sleeve, motion for me not to be rude and to respond to the greeting. On the surface, everything that happened after that wasn't at all remarkable, but much later, my mind was returned to that moment again and again. His lively eyes shining, the baker picks up a still warm sheet of mozza from the macaroni box, offers it to me, and says warmly and simply, "Good Yontif." At first, I'm frightened by the unexpected geniality, the special familial closeness expressed by a total stranger. The baker must have felt sympathy for the spiritual ignorance of the top students of Class A Intermediate School number 43 in Odessa, who did not yet know the joy that he is not alone in a cold and lonely world, but with his people. Behind the metal door of the oven, on its brick floor, lay open the pages of the book of their faith. The blazing tongues of flame at the far wall were the flames of history in which they burned more than once, burned but remained alive. I'm not yet capable of understanding that a holiday is the sensation of the warm hand of your people with whom you already share, if not their faith. The need for each you do not yet perceive because of your youth, then their faith. It was if the baker offering the piece of matzah said, "You and I are Jews, a single family." Still frowning, I take the matzah from the baker's hand. I do not understand the significance of this simple gesture. Now, from the perspective of over 40 years of wandering in alien worlds and lands, I see that in my fingers, the tiny flame-touched mounds in the matzah rise like braille. Then I did not yet know that I was blind. I did not yet understand that what I held in my hands was the Bible for the illiterate, the history of suffering of my people abridged for uninitiated. I did not understand that by accepting the matzah from the hands of another Jew, I took the first step of my private Passover, my own exodus, my own private flight toward freedom. That this flight would last the same presaged 40 years needed for the shameful habits of slavery to blow away in roaming through the desert. Nor did I know that to take the Passover vow to eat bland, crunchy, flat bread, to relinquish, if only for a time, thick, yeast-risen loaves, means that I vowed to cast away my arrogance, to condemn with that act the sin of pride, of which, however short of my life, I was still already guilty. Secretly, I consider myself smarter, better educated than my parents, who still obstinately clung to ancient traditions. Good Yontif, says the baker. I do not yet understand that at this moment, I have approached my Rubicon. I cannot accept the matzah and not say anything. That would be truly rude. But say in what language? To answer Yiddish would mean to admit de facto my Jewishness. Even though we are meeting for the first time, the baker addresses me as a family member, a close friend. How could I respond a good holiday to you too in Russian? I do not yet understand, but intuitively sense that it is incongruous, unnatural, and insulting to utter a Jewish greeting spoken in the language of mockery and harassment. If I were to switch over to Russian, by the very action, I would reject the closeness and warmth held for me. I would push away the person offering me friendship. It would be the same as, no, worse than hiding my hand behind my back and or shoving in my pocket if he extended his own hand to shake it. I take the matzah from the baker's hand. My fingers are tense. The matzah breaks between them. I have yet to learn that other human values are equally brittle. Freedom, trust, friendship, love, life itself. One awkward move can sometimes be enough to destroy them. Good yontif, overcoming myself, I finally say under my breath. Okay, so that's the period happened before Stalin's death. 1953, Stalin died. However, his anti-Semitic policy did not. And here, what Jews faced at that time is discrimination obtaining higher education. So it was known that one of his press conferences in the 50s, Nikita Khrushchev said something to that extent that Jews never feel educated enough. In other words, all the rumors that we prevent them from getting higher education, they just want too much. So therefore, but there existed secret state quotas of how many Jews you can accept. Nobody knew how many and how it will happen. And the reaction to it was a Jewish joke of that time that a young Jewish man applies for to the committee to be accepted to university, and they try to obviously ask him questions that it's practically impossible to answer. For example, they ask him, how could you explain that Leo Tolstoy in one of his writings says that he remembers himself from the 40th day since his birth? To which the Jewish young man said, so what's the big deal? I remember myself from the 8th day. Well, tell us, what do you remember? Well, I remember how an old man came to our apartment, washed his hands, took a blade in his hand, and cut off my chances to be admitted to your university. So that's this Jewish reaction. Also, discrimination in seeking employment. Another Jewish underground jokes is about a Jew who applies for a job in circus. So the circus director says, okay, tell me what you can do. Well, I can do salto mortale, going on a tightrope. And the director says, oh, big deal, everybody can do it. Yeah, well, I can do it while sitting on a chair. And he does it. So the director is not impressed. Well, everybody can do it. It's no big deal. Yeah, but the Jewish a man says, I can do it while playing violin. All right, show me. So the Jew is doing the salto mortale while playing a piece from Paganini. And when he finishes, the director says, well, I have to tell you, comrades, you have to straight, comrades Rabinovich, you're not Yasha Heifetz. In other words, he's still declined. So everybody, the very vulnerability of living in a hostile environment was the mark of the time. And it's probably one of the Jewish jokes of the time succinctly renders that kind of a feeling of what does it mean to live in a world in which from the outside world, in outside world, you feel insecure, only you're secure only with people you basically know. So this is, comes to hiding the very name, your Jewish name is something that will easily give you away. So as this item goes on, a telephone in a communal apartment rings. There was only one telephone for everybody in the communal apartment, obviously. So the phone call comes and says, may I talk to Moshe, please? And whoever picks up the phone says, we don't have anyone like that here. Okay, and hang up. It's after a while, another phone call and says, may I talk to Misha? And then you hear somebody shouting from the corridor, Moshe, it's for you. In other words, for the outside world, you cannot be presented as a Jew. For all that's the time. So, but here something comes out unexpectedly out of our reach, and I'm going to talk shortly to talk about events that changed the fate of Soviet Jews. It is known that Margaret Mead, American anthropologist, said, "No, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Just as illustration of it is this man, Jacob Berenbaum, a Holocaust survivor himself in America, a student. In 1964, he founded Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry organization, and it was a spearhead of American movement for the rights of the Soviet Jewry, and then pick up around the world. So in 1966, Elie Wiesel published a book, The Jews of Silence, calling attention to the plight of the Soviet Jews. We were not aware of it at all, living behind the Iron Curtain, but this movement eventually took over the Western world. And in 1968, finally, it was a breakthrough. The immigration from Soviet Union was practically impossible from, let's say, mid-1920s all the way through that time. But because of this outside pressure, the breakthrough came with allowing controlled and limited immigration. What was the purpose of it? The government, the Soviet government, decided it will lower they hoped it will lower the anti-Soviet rhetoric in the West. They will get rid of the most vocal group of Jewish troublemakers. There was a lot of this movement inside of Jewish community. By the time of Israel fighting Six-Day War and winning it, it was an attempt to go back, get out of the country. And so, and to let out a few thousand retirees, that's what I thought. They only showed that they hardly knew the country. They thought that's the ideas of the KGB had on Andropov and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gromyko. That's what I thought. They submitted this proposal to the Politburo. That's what they thought it would do, the official immigration. So, and they obviously, as usual, planned spies to create underground network in Israel and the West. However, instead of a few thousand applications that they expect, Soviet visas, exit visa offices around the country was flooded with hundreds of thousands of them. Okay. So, was it any hope for the future for the Soviet Jews? No, the underground humor showed that hardly. They made fun of it. For example, well, maybe if you think that under communism there would be no fifth eye, that's something I have to explain that for those who may not know it. In Soviet Union, every passport carried the fifth item, nationality, basically it's ethnicity. And it says here, this example, a Jew. It's not a matter of religion, a matter of ethnicity. So therefore, and you will identify it immediately, if not by your immediate Jewish name, you could be identified as a Jew right away by what your internal passport. So the joke goes like that: will there be the fifth item, the ethnicity in Soviet passport under communism? In other words, would they know that you're a Jew? Would it matter that you're a Jew under communism? They say no, but there will be the sixth item, were you a Jew under socialism? In other words, no chances of of changing your lot. So, though starting late 1960s, Soviet government formally permitted Soviet Jews to apply, I have to explain such a step was highly risky. First of all, applicants were often rejected on deliberate grounds, and your career is irreparably ruined. Secondly, due to lack of information, it was impossible to predict what to expect for you outside of the USSR, how you will handle, how you'll survive. So therefore, for me, it was also, I describe it in my this book, The Jet of Crocodile, the event that actually I was also a total wreck, of course, trying to make the decision. And yeah, since I belong to the Union of Journalists, the House of Journalists screened for the members of the journalistic community foreign movies that not necessarily were shown outside for the larger public. So, so this is the House of Journalists. So one particular movie that I saw there made a difference in my life and helped me to make my decision to immigrate. And the movie was the Bless the Beasts and Children by Stanley Kramer. So in this particular movie, actually the story is about a group of teenagers who are horrified witnessing bloodbath, how idle people who had nothing better to do come to some corral with buffaloes and shoot them almost point blank. So they're horrified and they try to prevent the same thing happen again. So they go to at night. The boys rush through the night, try to help, knowing that the hunters will come in the morning and start shooting. So the boys rush through the night. First, they ride their horses. Then they hotwire a beaten up utility car. When they run out of gas, they reach the reserve on foot. Setting the buffaloes free turns out to be a formidable task. They're locked up behind a metallic fence. Time is pressing. The boys are desperate. How the hell are they supposed to do it? One boy throws himself behind the wheel of a small car at the parking lot nearby and rams the corral fence, creating an opening. Now the buffaloes can escape. Hey, the boys shout, you're free now, run. However, the buffaloes don't move a muscle. They have no intention of escaping. They ignore the opportunity to free themselves. Their captivity has its advantages. It feels safe, it's predictable. Giving up freedom means they no longer have to be on guard at all times. The boys turn up their radio, they hoot, halloo, and cheer. Finally, the buffaloes walk out of the corral leisurely and stop nearby and graze peacefully. The boys are mortified. They're fearful of witnessing another bloodbath. They scream to the buffaloes, move, the hunters are coming. Nothing helps. So the closing scene has a profound effect on me. It makes me sweat. My heart beats fast. An iron ball rolls up in my throat and gets stuck there. I'm watching the movie with my friend Grisha, who is also a Jewish journalist. I elbow him. He's flummoxed. What's wrong with me? I'm not known for being physical when expressing my feelings. What's the matter with you? He whispers. I know that so far Grisha does not think of leaving the country. Therefore, I don't do what I'll feel like doing, to shout to him, don't you see? The movie is not about poor beasts. It's about people like me. How am I different from those dumb buffaloes? The corral gate has cracked open for me and I still sit on the fence. How am I better than those animals? I'm disgusted with myself. What's the matter with me? Why do I still drag my feet? I need to stop beating around the bush. I must seize the opportunity, no matter how risky it is. It won't last forever. Enough is enough. I'm a human being, for God's sake, not some witless buffalo. At this moment, I know I have reached a point of no return. I realize that if I give in to my fears of the unknown, or whatever lies following the fateful filing an exit visa application, or whatever else I might encounter afterwards and stay, I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror. I will lose whatever little self-respect I've been able to preserve throughout my Soviet life, the life full of big and little everyday indignities. I'll have nothing but contempt toward myself. I'm worse than those Kramer's buffaloes. I'm a coward. If it weren't for the boys, the buffaloes would not have understood that they should run for their lives. I'm a human being. Am I not? The next day, I grab my long awaited pile of papers and take them to the local exit visa office. If they reject me, I say to myself, at least I won't blame myself for not even trying. After a long, long while, I am sound asleep the entire night. Years after the fact, every time I recall that episode of my life, I say to myself, bless the beasts and children, bless Stanley Kramer. That's how I made my decision. And needless to say, I never rejected. I never regret that I did it. So this is now I'm talking about the immigration process that I described in my book, Farewell, Mama, Odessa. I'm with my year-old son in Odessa, holding him before immigration. And this is the rest of our family. We'll all be given these traveling documents. We were stripped of citizenship, for which we had to pay a hefty fee. And we all helped with Jewish organizations, Global Jewish Advocacy, with Joint American Jewish Distribution Committee, with Hayas, who paid for our tickets and helped us to get, so people will go from Odessa by train to the station CHOP. Then they go through the customs and then take train with several transfers and get to the Rome, and where we waited for our visa to come to different destinations. Some people went to Israel, some to Canada, and I came to Odessa because my relative was there. That's the only person I knew outside of the world who was there. So basically, when you come to a totally new country, totally new culture, we found tremendous problems on the first steps of our American life. For example, to find a job, you have to submit a resume. And it seems to be a simple thing for, for Americans, but it was not a simple thing for us because, first of all, we are not used to extol our values for the potential employer. Just the opposite. In Russian culture, you should not talk about yourself that much. It was a Russian proverb. Even what do you say? I. Remember, yeah, is the Russian letter is the last. Remember, the yeah is the last letter in the Russian alphabet. So that was very difficult to find in our background. Obviously, there were professionally many sound professionally people, but it was not easy to do it. Secondly, the interview itself, we were trained by our American friends how to behave in interview. Little things like keeping eye contact. In Russia, it is oftentimes invitation for a fight. You cannot keep eye contact. Secondly, smile, the American smile. For American smile means everything is okay, but it's not accepted. It was not accepted in Russian culture. It was mostly smile reserved for close friends and family. And so therefore it was also, you have to find a way to do it. And limited vocabulary. I would probably end with some example of it. Yeah, we knew the basic English, basic vocabulary, but not idioms. And one of the embarrassing episodes that happened to me is that I was called. I called to the a local bank and asked for the a person in charge of the automobile loans. So I was told, oh, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, but Mr. Smith has passed away. So I immediately asked him when he's coming back, because we knew, obviously, I knew the word pass, but not pass away, that's what it means. So that's, despite all of it, I want to end my short talk by showing that basically overall ex-Soviet Jews contribute largely to the very successful, one of the most successful groups of immigrants. I'm talking about, first of all, I'm just giving you highlights of the most known personalities. Journalist and author Masha Gessen, celebrity novelist Lara Vapnyar and Gary Steingart, a world Olympic champion in swimming, Lenny, and then Mila Kunis, the actress. Then especially in technology, the children of the immigrants. It is known that WhatsApp was created by one of them. Same was going for PayPal, but maybe Lipchin. And finally, probably many people know that the Google co-creator is Sergey Brin, also a child who came to America. That's that's more or less covers the territory that I try to that I address in my memoir books. Thank you, and thank you for opportunity to Emilium for this introduction. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer to the best I can.
Well, thank you, Emil. That was a fascinating talk about your three books. I've only read one of them so far, which was very enjoyable. I look forward to reading the others when time allows. If you have questions for Emil, please put them in the Q&A, and we will put them to him to answer them. Emil, you described the big problems in applying to emigrate to America, but seemingly you didn't have too many problems. Did that surprise you? I mean, they agreed you could go. You had some problems after they agreed, but you seemed to get the agreement pretty quickly. Did that surprise you?
Well, it did not. You see, it was. I applied in May 1974, and in sometime in end of August, I received permission. Well, I have no idea what was the basis of it, but by and large, usually they try to hold people who are of high value to. If you had any connection to the military industry, you had a problem to get out. I didn't have it. I worked as an editor in a technical publishing house that was not by any means connected to any sensitive data. Also, it was they needed at the time when they needed to show some trickle of immigrants coming out. Probably I was a safe case. To begin with, I was a satirist. Who wants to have a satirist in the country if he wants to get out? That was probably one of the reasons. I don't know to what extent, but nevertheless, it's. I did not present much of a value for them. I imagine. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about satire, because when you say you wrote satire in the Soviet Union, it's almost something we can't imagine, and yet you describe. I mean, you've explained some of the Russian humor, which is a particular genre, particular style, but very funny. But how do you write satire in a country like that? And did you have to maybe change your technique as time went on?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I wanted to invite everybody who's interested. I'll have a kind of a talk specifically on this subject on Monday. University of College of London invited me, and after the talk, I'll send you I'll send you the link if you whoever interested we can talk at length at that time. I'll just talk about only of that subject. But in a short kind of my short answer is that you were okay. The Soviet satire was needed for as official kind of a platform was to fight separate shortcomings that that stopped us on the way to communism. In other words, you cannot criticize the system itself. For example, most of my, especially in the first period of my writing, was about economy, and that you could not say that the economy doesn't work. you have to be very specific. And I believe that actually my career started with newspaper editor who gave me a letter from a woman who complained about the poor quality of onesis for a newly born child. And because it immediately almost like went to pieces. But you could not say that the country cannot produce goods for the consumer goods. You have to say only this particular factory in this particular city is doing not a good job. They have to shape up. That's it. In other words, there's no overall criticism of the system as such. That's the main thing, what's important. So you are limited in the subject to open to criticism.
But you find ways round. It's actually very interesting to read in The Jaws of the Crocodile how your technique changes as the authorities are sort of on your tail, and I would recommend it. We have quite a few questions coming in from viewers now. Elena Ioletto wants to know about your education. How far were you able to get in school in the USSR, and did you have to finish your education in the United States?
Well, I received my okay. I tell this story, of course, since you read my last book. I tell this story that I dreamed being a young man and being romantic and not quite accepting the forewarning of my parents that you don't have much future trying to be a writer in Soviet Union, being a Jew. But was forced to take to at least to seek education as an engineer, and I, with many things that are not easy to explain in a nutshell, I got engineering degree from Odessa Polytechnical Institute. But very shortly afterward, I was bored with it, and the opportunity came to try my hand as a freelancer to write for the newspaper within these limits that I explained to you. I switched my line of work, and then I found a job as an editor of technical publishing house, which means based on some technical knowledge that I acquired from Odessa Polytechnical Institute and my writing skills, of course. So that allowed me to, kind of to sustain my life over there. But basically, the true education, what I really wanted, I got 20 years later in the United States. Shortly after I came to the United States, by chance, by circumstances, I was invited to join the graduate school at UCLA, and I wrote dissertation on Saltykov-Shchedrin, one of the probably most famous, at least in Russian letters, satirists of 19th century. And it was my dissertation, and I got my degree in Russian literature. And since then, I work as a professor at Hunter College in New York City.
We have a question from Abigail Kaplan. Did you keep in touch with friends and extended family back in Odessa, and were they penalized in any way after you left?
That's a very good question, because in a short while, practically all members of my family immigrated. They all, needless to say, to Southern California, where I am. So I would say by the end of the Soviet regime in 1990, practically none of my extended family, even from Minsk and Odessa, remained in Russia. They all immigrated one way or another. So I did not have. I had a friend still in Moscow who could not sitting on the fence, as I described it, but he has. He could not leave because I know this was a problem for many artists. He was a scriptwriter in Russian, of course, and he knew that he would have a difficult time to regain his position in the West because of many things, not knowing neither language nor culture nor other things. So he stayed there, and unfortunately, I write about him in a book. You probably remember his Boris Lapkov is one of my closest friends that I described. Yeah.
Speaking of writing in Russian, we have a question from Jeanette Marks. Do you write your books in Russian or do you write them in English?
That's a very good question. I published two collections of short stories in Russian that I wrote in Russian. Some of the, my dissertation, for example, on Siltakov-Shchedrin, I wrote in Russian and then translated with the help of course, of editor into English. Now, these books, that the trilogy that I'm talking about, most of it, probably at least a rough draft, I put it in Russian just to be sure that I know what I'm talking about. And then it going to so many levels of polishing in English until obviously I have close friends, beta readers and so on. You know, in other words, I would not lie that it's easy. No, it's not. But it's all, you know, end result of many, many trials. You know.
Well, they read very well and the vocabulary is diverse. So you've obviously learned quite a bit since you came to America. Gabrielle Sivan asks, were you aware of the efforts made by Jews in the West to campaign for the liberation of Soviet Jewry? Certainly, I remember as a child, lots of demonstrations and activism. Were you aware that was going on?
Well, that's my actually. I think it's in this book. I forgot which of the books I actually described the real event that my friend of mine said to me. Do you know there was a delegation of American Jews came to Moscow, and they said that in America on bumper stickers you can see "Save Soviet Jews." And I remember how touched I was. I never believed that somebody would care about us because we felt totally isolated from the world. Yes, to that extent I knew, but obviously not to the whole wide world. Obviously, we tried to listen to the Voice of America, to BBC, but they all to call Israel, to German Wave radio station in Russian. However, it was all jammed. So we tried to shortwave radio, get out of the city, try to catch maybe better. So we were basically aware of something is going on, but not definitely not the whole picture of it.
Yvonne Cheney is talking about her grandparents who emigrated in the late 19th century. She assumes they were escaping from pogroms. You did not mention pogroms. Had they vanished at the time? I mean, you describe intense anti-Semitism, but I don't think you describe any violence.
No, actually, there was always like a sense, maybe it's a memory of my parents. They all were scared. They expected any time that pogroms will be. Probably there were some, but not to the extent, of course, that was I read from literature of the 19th century. There was a kind of a fierce hostile situation, discrimination every step, as I said, but did not come, at least not to my knowledge, to any pogroms on the scale of Chisinau or Odessa in the beginning of 20th century. Yeah.
Herbert Weller says, didn't the authorities feel cheated? They paid to educate you and you were abandoning their investment in you.
Yeah, exactly. There was an attempt to impose a tax. Actually, around the time when I applied for immigration, there was an attempt to impose a tax for education. And that created a tremendous, as I understand, the outcry in the West, that it's almost like you have to pay for your freedom. You have to pay for, in other words, you did not, what the answer is what, look, you did not give opportunity for these people to use their knowledge in the country. Now you want them to, now you want to punish them for that, by paying back. So no, it was removed from the agenda, and yeah, it's no longer was, at least in my time, nobody. I was also afraid because the fee, even the fee to leave the country, you have to pay for. You have to pay for being stripped of citizenship. You have to pay. And almost it reminded me when I read it later on in the books that during the Nazi regime, that they would. They after the capital punishment in the German Gestapo prison, they would they would burn, let's say, the man or the woman who was accused of this state crime, and they will send it back to the relative with a bill to pay for all the services. And I felt almost like the same thing, that we have to pay still for being stripped of citizenship.
Sarah Leman asks, have you returned for visits since the fall of the Soviet Union?
Yes, I came back in 15 years. I came on the eve of 1975 to the United States of America. And the first time it was possible to go back under Gorbachev in 1990. I came back, and frankly speaking, it was totally unexpected. At the time when I left in 1974-75, nobody of us ever thought that it will be end of Soviet Union one day. Nobody thought it would happen. And when eventually that really happened, it gave some kind of a thought of, my God, something happening. They again, I came back, I found all my old friends, people, editor who know me, they published my stories in the newspapers and magazines, and interviewed me and so on. But shortly after, I found that so many traits of the Russian state politics came back, and I did not feel really that much of a welcome back to the country. So I never regretted that I left it. That's the answer. Yeah.
And what about the anti-Semitism? I mean, you've described its origins with the Second World War and sort of carrying on from there. Is that still there, or has that?
Well,
has that
I don't think it is to that extent now, because first of all, there are so very few Jews left in Soviet. Of course, it's still there. You know, like racism is unfortunately it's a trait of human foible, not only toward Jews, of course. It's still there, but not to that extent, because to begin with, there are so many other now hate groups in Russia today. So Jews, of course, is still there. You'll go on some site, same anti-Semitic slogans, so on, but not today. It stopped to be a state policy. That's the most important. The state. When we lived there, we had everyday anti-Semitism from grassroots, and we had a state policy of anti-Semitic kind of policies as well. Now it's at least that part is the upper part is it's no longer there to that extent that was existed before. So that's probably what
okay. We'll take one last question from Sheila Bond. Sheila says, you've now lived in the USA for your adult life. Are you confident about the strength of American democracy and its influence for good in the world? And I think it's probably worth mentioning before you answer that question that you're still writing satire, but you write satire about America
yes.
now. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Actually, it's a very, very kind of a trying question, because frankly, sometime what's going on now in America is something that would be a total surprise for, if we will go back in time to back 1975, would never imagine that something of that sort would happen in America, that America became so divided. And the very principle of democracy will be so much tried. But it gave me a lot of thought of the nature of American culture, something that I'm addressing. I'm working on a new book, actually, on my continuation, if you wish, of this trilogy about my not few years, but 40 years. I'm already over 40 years in America. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. What is in American culture, on the underpinning of it, that created today's kind of a tension that never existed before? So I'm halfway through.
Well, please do come back and tell us about that when it's finished. We'll be delighted to welcome you again. Thank you so much for being our guest this evening. It's kind of you to spend time with us. As a little thank you, I'm going to send you a book of some photography. This is Magen David Adom in Israel, saving lives proving that Jews and Arabs can live together and work together in harmony with common goals and aims. Emil's books, and especially in the Jaws of the Crocodile, are available on Amazon, and also for Kindle, where some of them are quite a bit more affordable than the print. Highly recommended. Now, let me briefly tell you about some of our up and coming events. Next Monday, the 24th, we welcome back Yankee Fachler. He's speaking this time about the Jews of Bletchley Park. And then we're off for bank holiday, but back on Monday, the 7th, of June, with historian Daniel Lee. He's speaking about his recently published page turner, The SS Officer's Armchair, which is a factual book and absolutely gripping. On the 14th of June, the novelist Austin Duffy is with us in conversation to speak about his latest novel, 10 Days, another excellent read. And on the 21st of June, Michael Thomas will be telling us a fascinating story about how he reunited 5 half siblings from 4 different mothers and 1 common Jewish father. Please book at milim.org.uk. All our events are free, but a small donation will help with the costs of our work and staging these webinars. It remains for me to thank our speaker, Emil Draitser, once again. I'm looking forward to welcoming you at a future event. Until then, stay safe.